Okay, welcome back to another video on my channel. It's your teacher Muslim here, and in this video we're going to be looking at absolute value and square roots. So by the end of this lesson you'll be able to take some graph of y equals f of x and sketch these different transformations. Y equals the absolute value of f of x, y equals f of the absolute value of x, the absolute value of y is equal to f of x, combinations of those three, as well as sketch y equals root f of x and y squared is equal to f of x. Now, this might seem a little intimidating at first because of all these different notations, and you might be wondering to yourself, how am I going to know what to do? It's actually not too bad. It took me a little bit of time, but with practice, you'll get used to it. So let's have a look at the first part of this lesson. On the left here, we've got y equals f of x. So these are the original functions. And then we're going to transform these two, three different ways. Here we've got y equals the absolute value of f of x, then y equals f of the absolute value of x, and then absolute value of y is equal to f of x. So how are we going to do this? Well, we need to have a look at this. If f of x is positive, when we absolute value a positive number, it's just going to be exactly the same thing. However, if f of x is negative, and then we absolute value it, it's going to become positive. Okay, the positive version of it, of itself. So what that means is that any negative y value will become positive. And that's why I have here my notes. Anything below the x-axis gets reflected above the x-axis. So all of this will stay the same. All of this will stay the same. Because when we absolute value those positive y values, it's going to look exactly the same. But this bit down here is going to be reflected above the x-axis. It's going to become the positive version. So here we can see we've got negative 2, negative 3. It's going to become negative 2, positive 3. Here we've got minus 1, minus 4, so it's going to become positive 4. Minus 3 is going to become positive 3. And that should be enough for us to be able to draw that. Alright, I'm going to have a go with the next one. Y is equal to f of the absolute value of x. So what does this mean? Let's just maybe work through this example. Here we've got when x is equal to 1, f of 1 is 0, right? It's got a y value of 0. But f of minus 1 has a y value of negative 4. What this is saying, however, is we don't want f of negative 1. We're going to absolute value that. So f of the absolute value of negative 1 will just technically be f of 1. Well, f of 1 over here is 0. So f of minus 1 is also going to be 0. So we can see here from my notes, I said when we have this, y equals f of the absolute value of x, all we're going to do is reflect the right of the y-axis across the y-axis. So whatever this is, to the right of the y, is just going to be reflected across the y-axis. Okay, how that makes sense? And the last one, we've got the absolute value of y is equal to f of x. Now, when we were going through absolute values, let's say we had the absolute value of x is equal to negative 3. We defined absolute values as the distance from 0. Well, we can't have a negative distance, so that doesn't make any sense. But if we had the absolute value of x is equal to positive 3, then we know that x could be either plus or minus 3. Because from 0, both of those values have a distance of 3. So what we have here, the absolute value of y is equal to f of x, if this happens to be a positive number, then there will be two possible y values. Okay, so if this was 5, then the absolute value of y, if the absolute value of y is equal to 5, then y will have to be plus or minus 5. So what we're going to do is, we're going to have a look at this. We can see here that everything below the x-axis has a negative y value, which means our f of x is negative. But that doesn't make sense, right? The absolute value of y equals a negative. We can't have a negative distance, so all of that's just going to disappear. Instead, all of this will remain, as will this, but they are just the positive versions. If we also want the negative versions, we just need to reflect that below the x-axis as well. So we're just going to reflect this. It's going to look something like that, and something like that. Now, my way of memorizing this is to just memorize this one. That one, everything's positive, right? When we absolute value f of x, everything's going to be positive. For the second one, when we've got the absolute value of x, it's going to reflect across the y-axis. So x and y. Here we've got the absolute value of y, it's going to reflect across the x-axis. So before, when we were learning like how to reflect across the reflect a function across the x-axis, we replaced y with negative y. And when we reflected across the y-axis, we replaced x with negative x. Right? So using the same sort of connection, when we want to reflect when we want to reflect a graph across the x-axis, we replace y with negative y, and y-axis, we replace x with negative x. Here we've got the absolute value of y will reflect across the x-axis. Absolute value of x will reflect across the y-axis. Okay, so that's how I've memorized it. Alright, so maybe I'll get you to pause the video and have a go with this one, and then I'll get you to check your answers. Okay, so for the first one, we want to sketch y equals the absolute value of f of x, so everything's going to be positive. So all of this will remain where it is, as will this. But this bit down here will be reflected up. And this bit down here will also be reflected up. Something like that. For the next one, we've got y is equal to f of the absolute value of x, which means we're going to reflect across the y-axis. So I'm going to take what's to the right, and I'm going to reflect that across the y-axis. So it looks like it's going to go through here and here. And it's going to be all of that. And for the last one, the absolute value of y is equal to f of x, so we're going to reflect across the x-axis. So I'm going to take what's above it. We haven't used. Take what's above it, and then reflect. And that's it. Okay, so let's just do a quick recap. Y is equal to the absolute value of f of x. Everything will become positive, so everything will be above the x-axis. Y equals f of the absolute value of x. Well, we're just going to reflect across the y-axis, and the absolute value of y will reflect across the x-axis. Alright, now let's have a look at some combinations. We're going to sketch y equals the absolute value of f of the absolute value of x. The absolute value of y is equal to the absolute value of f of x. The absolute value of y is equal to f of the absolute value of x. And the absolute value of y is equal to the absolute value of f of the absolute value of x. Sounds confusing, but let's have a look at this. So here we've got our first example. Y equals f of x, exactly the same thing as before. This time, we're going to have a look at this. Y equals the absolute value of f of the absolute value of x. We actually need to work inside out. So we need to do this bit first before we do this bit. So according to this, according to my notes, if we need to do the absolute value of x first, we need to reflect across the y-axis first. After that, absolute value of f of x just means everything is positive, so everything will be above the x-axis. So what does this look like? I'm going to reflect the right of the y-axis across the y-axis. So we've got all this. I'm going to reflect it. Something like that. And then what's below will come above. Right? We're going to take whatever's negative and it's going to become positive. So all of this bit here is going to come up. About -3 looks like. So my final answer will be this. That will be the final answer. I can just get rid of all that. Alright, the second one. We need to do this bit first before we do that bit. So according to this, we need to have whatever's below becomes positive, and then we're going to reflect whatever's above below. So what does that mean? It means all of this down here is going to come up. So it's going to come up to 4, go through 3, that's 3 as well. So I'm going to have all of this. Right? So that bit is the absolute value of f of x. But now we need to do the absolute value of y, where we need the plus and minus values. So basically it's just going to be a mirror image, a reflection of this across the x-axis. Right? Remember, absolute value of y, reflect across the x-axis. So I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to reflect it. Right. Next one. The absolute value of y is equal to f of the absolute value of x. Again, we need to do this first, which means absolute value of x, we need to reflect across the y-axis, and then do this, absolute value of y, reflect across the x-axis. So we'll do reflect across the y-axis first. So this is what we have, and we need to reflect that. Now we need to reflect what's above below. So remember how we've got this absolute value of y? We can't have a negative distance. So all of this down here below the x-axis, they disappear. So I'm just going to remove that, and that's just going to go like that, because all of this below is going to disappear, and now we can reflect across the x-axis. Alright, and this last one has all three. So we need to reflect, remember, inside out. Reflect across the y-axis first, and then we're going to make everything positive, and then we can reflect what's above below. So reflect across the y-axis. I'm going to have all of this reflected. Good enough. Reflect what's below, above, so all this is going to come up to here. And maybe we should just get rid of this now. And then we're going to reflect what's above below. So that means all of this will stay here. And then we're going to reflect it. Like so. Alright, here's example 2. Maybe I'll get you to pause the video and have a go with this on yourselves. Okay, according to this, we need to reflect across the y-axis first, and then whatever is below comes above. So all of this will be reflected. And then whatever is below will come above. So all of this will come up, and all of this will come up, and all of this will come up. Which means that we will not have this down here. We'll just have that. Alright, second one. Everything is going to come to above the x-axis first, and then we're going to just reflect everything that's above below. So all of this is going to stay where it is, as will this. This bit here will come up. This bit down here will come up. And then we're just going to reflect below. Alright, reflect across the y-axis first, and then reflect across the x. So all of this will be reflected. And now we're going to remove all the ones below the x-axis and reflect what's above below. So let's put this. And we'll just reflect what's above below. And last one, 3 different things. reflect across the y-axis, put everything at the top, and then reflect below. So I'm going to reflect all of this. I'm going to make all of that that's below come up. Might as well get rid of all this. And then reflect what's above below. So all of this will now be reflected. Like so. Alright. Let's have a look at the last part of this lesson, which is sketching y equals the y equals the square root of f of x, and y squared is equal to f of x. So here's some keynotes. Root 1 is just 1, and root 0 is just 0. You can't square root a negative, so anything below the x-axis will disappear. The square root of a number larger than 1 is always less than that number, but still more than 1. And the square root of a positive number less than 1 is more than that number, but less than 1. So what I mean by that, let me just get my trusty calculator out. If I were to square root a number less than 1, so let's say 0.5, but the answer is more than 0.5. Right? But it's still less than 1. That's because 0.7 times 0.7, when we multiply a decimal that's less than 1 by itself, it's going to get smaller. Okay. So when we square root, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to get bigger. So we can apply this understanding to graphs as well. So here we've got an example where we want to sketch y equals the square root of f of x as well as y squared equals f of x. Personally, I find it easier to just sketch on top of the graph given, and then just sketch the final answer in the box. So let's start with that. We know that we can't square a negative number. So all of these y values that are negative, we can't square root them. However, we know that we can square root 0, and the square root of 0 is 0, and at these 3 points, the y value is 0. We also know that the square root of 1 is 1. So at these 3 points, they all have a y value of 1, and the square root of 1 is just 1. At this point here, we've got 4. Square root of 4 is just 2. So if I were to put that in here, it's going to go through there. We got an asymptote at y equals 4, so this is going to be an asymptote at y equals 2, because the square root of 4 is 2. Now this bit here, maybe I'll highlight it in green. This bit here is less than 1. It's positive, but less than 1. And when we square root a number that's less than 1, it's going to give us an answer that's bigger than the number we square rooted. So when we draw this, it's going to lie above that line here, above that line that's given. For this section here, when we square root those numbers which are greater than 1, it's going to give us an answer that's less than the number that we square rooted. So that means we know that the line that we draw will be less than or below this line here, below these answers. It might look more curved. Same with this section. It's going to lie below. this section here is less than 1, the square root of those will be more. Same with this one. When we square root those, it's going to be, the answer will be greater than the number we square rooted, so it's going to lie above that. And this section here, all above 1, so when we square root, it's going to be less than that answer. Going to lie below. So it looks like that's it. That's our answer for this. So let's just put that in. So minus 2, minus 4, 2, 2. So the 0 here, here, and here. At minus 1 will be at 1. At 1 will be 1. 3 will also be 1. 0 will be 2. It's going to be an asymptote. And then we can graph the rest. So it looks like it's something like this. And that's it. What about y squared is equal to f of x? Now, you might notice, hey, these two are really similar. I mean, if we square root this one, won't we get y is equal to the square root of f of x? Which is pretty much that. Yes, but also no. Okay, remember when we square root, we get plus minus. Okay, so technically this will be y is equal to plus minus root f of x. This one here is only the positive version. So if we want to graph y squared is equal to f of x, all we need to do is we need to take that answer and also reflect it in the negative, below the x-axis. Because it's not just the positive, it's also the negative. So that makes it nice and easy. Let's see, what can I do? I might see if I can copy this. And I'll paste it over here. Nope. And then I'm just going to reflect that. -1, -2. Like so. Okay. So now what I want you to do is I want you to have a go with this last one. So pause the video, have a go, and then you can check your answers. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Square root of 0 is 0. Square root of 1 is 1. We can't square root negative, so all of these will disappear, right? So let's just cross them out. Right. When we square root this section here, that is less than 1. So when we square root that, it's going to be more than the number that we square rooted. So the line we're going to draw is going to be above that line. Same with this one. Going to lie above. Same with here. Less than 1, so square of something less than 1 will be more than the answer. So just a bit. So it looks like we've got, it looks like semicircles. So let's just draw another one here. Just draw the arrow. And that's what we've got there. However, for y squared is equal to f of x, it's going to be exactly the same thing, except it's going to be reflected across the x-axis as well, because we need the positive and the negative. So I'm just going to add in that one more here. Something like that. Alright, 3 more questions. For the function f of x is equal to x minus 2, sketch the graph of y squared equals f of x. Maybe I'll get you to pause the video and have a go with this one. Okay, so here I've sketched f of x is equal to x minus 2. We know it's a straight line that goes through a y-intercept of minus 2. So remember, everything below the x-axis we can't square root, so all of these will disappear. The square root of this section here, because that's less than 1, is going to lie above the line. Here we've got a y value of 4 when x is 6. The square root of 4 is 2. So it's going to go through there. So it's going to look something like this. Right? But remember, that is just y is equal to root f of x. Right? That's just the positive version. With y squared is equal to f of x, we need the positive and negative. So we need to reflect that as well. So it's going to come down here and here. You can have this sideways parabola, something like that. All right, let's have a look at question C. Sketch the graph of y equals the root f of x, given f of x is equal to x squared plus x minus 2, and state its domain and range. All right, I'll get you to pause the video and have a go with this one. Okay, so here I've drawn f of x is equal to x squared plus x minus 2. So we know the x-intercepts are minus 2 and 1 when we factorize. The y-intercept is negative 2. And the turning point is negative half, minus 9 and 4. So I've sketched that. Now we need to sketch y equals root f of x. So we know that all of this below the x-axis disappears because we can't square a negative number. We know that the square root of 0 is 0. We know that, well, let's just say that this bit is 1 here. Square root of 1 is just 1. Square root of 1 is just 1. And this section here is less than 1, so when we square root it, it's going to lie above. This section here is less than 1, so when we square root it, it's going to lie above. And then all of that will be below. Okay, and last one. Sketch graph of y squared equals f of x if f of x is equal to x bracket x minus 1, x minus 2. Pause the video, have a go with this one. Alright, so this is what it should look like approximately. It's not completely accurate because you haven't actually learned how to sketch these accurately yet. So what I've done is I just found about halfway between each of these x-intercepts. So when x is half, what would f of half equal to, or what would a y value be of that? It's about 3 and 8. And when f is 1.5, the y value will be negative 3 over 8. So both of them are less than 1 or negative 1. So with that, I've drawn f of x here. This is a rough sketch of it. When we want to sketch this, we need to square root and then reflect. Now we can't square anything negative, so all of this is going to disappear. But square root 0 is 0, or 0 is 0, or 0 is 0. All of this will disappear. This bit here is less than 1, and when we square root that, we're going to have an answer bigger than it, but still less than 1. So it's going to come up like that. This bit here, well, this section here, so that's square root of 1 is 1. This section here is less than 1, so it's going to square root of that will be greater. This bit here, greater than 1, square root of that will be less than. However, we want y squared, so we're going to reflect it. Like so. Alright, so that's it for this lesson. I hope you found this helpful. Hopefully now you know how to sketch absolute values and square roots. It can be a bit challenging, but let's have a quick recap. So we go back to the first bit of this section. We've got y equals the absolute value of f of x, means everything goes to the top. Y equals f of the absolute value of x. Absolute value of x means we reflect across the y-axis. Absolute value of y, we reflect across the x-axis. Then we can combine those three, and we get all these different ones, and we work inside out. And then we looked at square rooting. So root f of x is just a positive, because there's a positive sign here technically, not a negative. But y squared equals f of x means we need plus minus of the square root. So when we square root, remember you can't square root negatives. Square root of 0 is 0, root 1 is 1. If we root a number that's less than 1, but more than 0, so a positive decimal, the answer will be greater than the number that we square rooted. And if we square root a number that's greater than 1, the answer will be less than the number we square rooted. Alright, I hope you found this video helpful. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. See you guys.